Corriere. He's going to be coming over and talking about the Wardley mapping process. He's going to give us a 101 introduction to this. Chris helps with DevOpsDays in Atlanta and works for SJ Technologies with John Willis, and really looking forward to this one.
So y'all can't see the deck yet, but I've got Wardley struck through. So I originally thought I was going to be doing a workshop today, which would have been cool and would have been very hands-on. But since I've got a little bit more time and y'all don't have tables, we're going to do this sort of a blend. This is going to be more like an open space. So I'm zooming out a little bit and talking about mapping practices in general. We're going to talk about value stream mapping some, in addition to Wardley mapping, which is a form of value chain mapping. And I do have a bunch of cybersecurity magazines. I've got some security stuff baked into this talk. It's dependency mapping. So I've got an article published in here actually. This is the summer edition. So I am gonna ask questions. It's more fun if people answer. Anybody who answers gets a free copy of the magazine. So that's all I've got. I would have bought better swag, but this is oddly relevant to the conversation. So anybody from who here has done any mapping before? Anybody? We got one. What flavor of mapping?
Value stream mapping.
Value stream mapping. Okay. And is that from a lean practice or agile practice or both?
Agile.
Is anybody here just down with good old-fashioned cartography? Oh. So maybe we end up doing this more workshop style anyway. We're saving this part to the end, but let's start with the end and move towards the beginning as we're able. If y'all want to come in and center up, you'll be able to see the whiteboard. But the first thing I'm going to talk about, instead of value stream, so value stream map, the big thing with the value stream map, DevOps always talks about silos, right? So in a siloed environment, you have problems with communication. Who here is in an org that's like less than 100 people? More than like 250? Really big? Really big. So you can't, the larger your org gets, the harder it is to get everybody in the same room at the same time. So you have to have a level of silo, right? You're not going to get away from it completely. So what we end up doing, instead of trying to blow the silos up, we want to see them loosely coupled together. Data flow in both ways. So that is the TLDR in a value stream map. I have a more detailed graphic I hope I'm going to get to show you soon. A complement to these are value chain maps. So the value chain map, you are still looking at, you've got, usually with a value stream, you've got organization and then customer, move org over here. And then there's like some kind of ops function in the middle. So you've got requests coming in from the customer. Those are going to the org. So this is information flow at the top. In the middle, you've got process. And then down across the bottom, is where we see a flow of inventory. So you've got feedback inside this, but it says horizontal delivery of value across silos. The value chain map, you get a customer need at the top. And then we've got this dependency chain down that works off of what's highly visible down to what's invisible. So the standard example Simon always uses when he's showing this is a cup of tea. So if I go to a store to get a cup of tea, what's the first thing I see? What's highly visible to that customer? Cup. Oh, looks like we're good. I think they're moving the deck over. What else is visible? What goes in the cup? Tea. Ken said water. Scotch. Not usually. It's fancy tea. That's a different license. So what else do I need to make a cup of tea? I need a cup, I need my tea bags, I need water. What else do I need? What's that? Heat. Heat. Need a heating source. That was a good one. What was it?
Somebody to put it all together.
Someone to put it all together. I'm going to put them higher up. Barista. What else do I need? Heating source.
Milk and sugar if you're eating.
Yeah. Got condiments. What about a kettle? And I might even, no map is perfect. Some are useful. Left my eraser over here. So I'm going to swap those two. I'm going to put kettle above heating source. Because when you go get a coffee at Starbucks or a tea at a cafe, do you know how they heated up the water? What if they're using coal stoves to do that? Is that efficient and cost effective? What if they're using solar power? Maybe. Depends on where they got that from. So what Wardley did that was really brilliant is he took this value chain and broke it across a second axis. So where we had visible to invisible, that's still there. I'm going to erase this stuff for now. We'll draw it back. And I'm going to stick with black for the map. But we get this second axis across the bottom, which is evolution. So the first phase of evolution is going to be genesis, which is something that's super new. So I've been using cars that can drive themselves for this example right now. That's not a thing we have yet. Technically, self-driving cars is a little bit over here. It's emergent still, but we don't have it figured out. We're trying to get there. Once we get a practice out of Genesis, it moves into custom built. So once one of the big companies really figures out self-driving vehicles, everybody's going to start trying to copy them. Some of them will be more successful than others. You saw this same thing with compute, right? There was a while where personal computers were trying to be a thing and it really wasn't taking. And then finally it started to develop. But back in the day, we probably have some folks here that remember it. You had to go to the store and buy a bunch of parts and solder things together to get your personal computer. It was a thing out of Genesis. And you weren't dealing with individual chips necessarily, you were putting together boards. I had a professor in college that told me you couldn't go buy a monitor at one point. You had to go get a TV and disassemble it and hook it into the system to get a display on your TV. So they were in custom built at that point. But eventually we got sick of that too. And the next phase of evolution is product, where we hit a point that you could go buy a computer off the shelf. I had an NEC ready system. Before that, when I was really young, I had an IBM PC Junior. Anybody remember PC Junior? It didn't have a hard drive in it. Used to play Ghostbusters on that all the time. Once we get out of the product phase and we evolve past product, we go to what's known as commodity. So, do this in a different color. But with product, you get a rental function. So I could rent a computer instead of buying one. With commodity, it's a utility function instead. So this is what happened with Amazon and AWS. We went from being able to rent compute, custom build data centers to cloud compute. And cloud compute really put what I've been referring to as asterisk as a service, right? Because we went from infrastructure as a service, where you had to go in, you had your EC2 instance, but you had to run some kind of configuration management on it to get it stood up and talking. Then we hit platform, where it was, don't worry about your server config. You can give us, I'll say Docker, a container, or just your source code in some platforms, and it'll run. And now we're into FAS, which is functional as a service. And the difference between those two is compute went from being charged per hour to per function call. So it's a smaller increment of billing on it, which lets you compartmentalize from like a just-in-time manufacturing perspective and keep costs down. And this is sort of the back template for Wardley map. You've got visible to invisible, Genesis, custom built, product, and utility. And that utility function is true. If you look at EC2, you can turn on compute like a faucet or flipping a switch. That's what they provided. We could map this same thing out with self-driving vehicles. At some point, when those have hit a commodity function, you'll be able to summon an Uber from your device that's self-driving, right? Which is the same thing as flipping a switch, turning on a faucet. It's on demand when you need it, not any longer. You're not even really renting it anymore, right? Smaller level of compute than that. So what happens when we take our value chain that we had before, the one-dimensional one, and spread it across these 4 domains? So commodity function is usually where we get power from. Least visible, hopefully utility. What goes in the product space? We've got kettle. Water was a little bit more visible, but water is still going to be a commodity. North of that, we've got tea, a cup. And then we can connect these nodes together. Now we have a 2-dimensional value chain map. Yes?
Why aren't cup and kettle commodities?
So I can't flip a switch to get a kettle, and I can't turn on a faucet to get a cup. That's a product I got to buy off a shelf somewhere.
So tell the barista I'm renting it for my usage.
Now, you've got a point. So Ken's saying, what if it's like a mug? Am I not renting that? That's fair. You do get a rental function out of product. If it's disposable, not so much a rental. You bought that cup, you can keep it if you want. Now where this gets fun is this is a pretty garden variety approach. If we're opening a tea shop that's in perfect competition, this is the simplest thing you could do, the lemonade stand version of a tea shop. How might we differentiate ourselves from our competition? So let's play strategy game. I'll offer a magazine for this one because this is a more interesting question. But where's the strategy play? What do we want to change? Got a lot of stuff in products and a couple things in commodity. Where might we move one of those to a different phase of evolution to differentiate ourselves from our competitors? Move T over? That is a good one. Thank you, William. No, you're good. So let's move T, and we can move this over into custom built. Now we're in a situation where we're making custom T blends, right? You could move it farther over left. Maybe you want to, I think I spelled Genesis wrong. There we go. Maybe you want to start growing your own tea. Maybe you're growing mint and rose hips and stuff in the garden in the back. That's like Genesis. It's like farm to table tea shop, right? That is going to be more expensive. Is it going to be a differentiator that gives you a strategic advantage against your competition, or are you going to burn too much cash doing it? But the real thing to point out here is, let's say this is our current position, and we want to do this to say that we're going to move T into Genesis. A lot of DevOps is about communication and trust. Mapping, the point of mapping is always to facilitate a conversation. It's to streamline that communication. If you've got a mapping practice standardized in your org, instead of a half-hour meeting with 20, 30 slides in it, lots of back and forth, we might have to have that a few times. I've had it happen in an org where we can take a map with an annotation on it like that. Somebody goes, oh, I see what you're doing. And his question is that a risk we want to take? One of my favorite maps, I don't have it in the deck. I could have pulled it up. But it's, I guess I can draw it real quick. It was Netflix. And this one's a little bit more fun because Netflix is not T, it's tech, right? So what's all the obvious stuff that we would have, right? They've got compute. It's going to be down here. What else do they need? Content. So early Netflix, content was here. What happened? Started making them themselves. So you saw this shift from content being a product to something they shift over into custom built. And really what it was is nobody believed that they were going to do anything. It was a big joke, right? And Showtime, HBO, other multimedia companies, I'll say, were happy to sell them things that had gone into syndication or whatever. They were like, sure, buy it. Well, once they started getting big enough and started pulling enough traffic, they said, wait a minute, what they're doing is working. We better raise our prices, or better yet, let's just start flat telling them, no, we're not going to sell you any more content. And actually, we need to get a streaming service up and running, otherwise, we're going to have a problem. So at some point, and I would have loved to have been in the room, when somebody at Netflix came in and said, hey, instead of acquiring new video content, we need to start producing it. Like, let's go get a bunch of camera crews and the rest of it. And they probably said, you're out of your mind. That's not what we do. We stream content. They say, it's standard practice, right? Change or die. Choice is yours. So once you've got content over here, what comes with that? What do I need to produce a movie? Actors. What else?
Writers.
Cameras? I got writers. So I'm going to group this one up. Let's call that casting crew, okay? Lump it up. This is a global map. We don't want to get too zoomed in. We got to zoom out a little bit, right? Right, talent. So your cast and crew. Now, I probably made this mistake. Is that a product that we're going to rent? I don't think that's fair. I think I'm going to put cast and crew. They're really visible. And they're probably on this line between Genesis and custom built, because it's a person. It's not a product. I don't like the term human resources, right? What else do we need? Oh, and I like that this is highly visible to the customer, because if they get the right actor or actress starring in a show, people will go see it just because they're in it, right? Highly visible, there's a value add there. Makes sense for that to be up and to the left. What else?
Location, props.
Location, props. Let's, where's my, I think I want to do, let's do light and sound. I'm going to lump that together. So where does light and sound go on this? Is that a competency you think they built internally at Netflix? No. They put it over here. It's probably more visible than this, but this is the game we need to be playing with software too. Why are you writing, you shouldn't be writing a web server yourself anymore, right? There's an open source component for that. Same thing like if you're running a movie studio, you really don't need to be staffing your own light and film crew. You should be hiring an outside group that specializes in that, can come in with all the equipment, do the thing, and you're not paying to keep it, you're not paying to repair it, you're just getting that service from a rental perspective. So, I'm gonna give it a minute. Anybody have questions, thoughts, comments right now?
So if you move custom from product to custom build, wouldn't that also move up the visibility because you'd want to make that aware that that differentiates you from other people?
That's a good point. So you asked if we're moving from product to custom built, shouldn't that raise the visibility of it if it's a differentiator? And you're right. Generally, probably need another color. Generally, we want to see this kind of trend on a Wardley map. Sometimes you don't. If you do not see that trend, it probably means it's not the most efficient way to set it up. So if I've got a dot down here, it is probably costing me a lot of money and not providing me a lot of value. And I probably need to shift that. Given where it is in the visibility, I probably need to shift it over to a commodity function. Wardley's got some really ridiculous stories where they were buying servers and racks as components, and to get a server and a rack, it moved back to custom built. And they said, why is that a custom built thing? And they said, well, we've got custom racks. And it was like, and we've got to pull the servers in and drill holes in them for them to fit in the custom racks. And it went back and forth for a while about why are we doing this. And it ended up, I think it was friend of a friend, friend of the CTO, something like that, had this rack company. That the company was buying these custom racks because of a relationship that existed and spending all this money to drill holes in them. And the project they were scoping out was to automate that robotically, the drilling of the holes. That was not the right answer. The right answer was to move it over and get a standard rack from a product perspective. We've seen similar things where they're running reports. One company, one division of the company is printing out these reports. They ship them to this other part of the company. That part of the company was weighing them, I think, to figure out how many reports it were. And I think there was data entry back in to the system from that point, where there was this whole circle of activity going on, where pretty much if they had just digitized and gotten two people talking together, they eliminate that entire process. Didn't need to be optimized, need to be removed. But if you don't have trust, you're not going to be communicating. And putting it down on the map, it's suddenly obvious as to what the mistake was. So we're going to move to something more interactive.
Quick question on that.
Yep.
If the dot is
in the top right, is that a finer symptom?
So highly visible commodity. That's curious. It might be a strategic play. I don't know. I would have to look at the map. So I think of a hibachi grill. The way they're heating up the food, it's a bit custom. But I guess what it would really be a better example is if our tea shop was using solar power throughout and they had like solar power on the roof. They've got electricity at a commodity function, but that is one dot from a global perspective. If you drill down a level, what I often call regional, sometimes I call it intermediate scope, that solar power that's a commodity function internally has its own dependency chain at the bottom of which, or you're gonna have solar panels in there, you're gonna have batteries, you're gonna have inverters. So it's about the scale of that. And no map is perfect, some are useful. So, and at the end of the day, if that company is making money and happy with the product, the point is that even if you had a dot up here, or you had a dot down here that wasn't hitting this trend line, you had a quick way of sharing that information, understanding why you were sourcing the materials, where you were sourcing them from, and there's a holistic strategy within the organization. It's that communication and that trust, that we know what we're doing and we know why we're doing it. Any other questions, comments? I was going to get us to draw a map real quick, go a little interactive. So that'll also give me time to go double check with AV, see if we're getting slides up. Does anybody have any idea how much time we've got left? 5-10 minutes. All right, we can do this that quickly. So Wardley's got Sun Tzu Art of War stuff that he does, 100 days of mapping, and it honestly takes too long. So this is a quicker way of doing it. This is called a social practice mapping exercise. So we've got skills and know-how, symbols and meaning, and then, okay, our last one is going to be tools and materials. So let's do web app in the cloud. We need to get on-prem infrastructure migrated into the cloud, right? What skills and know-how do we need? Like, I'm going to put Terraform. We need to know how to do test-driven development, source control. I'm going to need a cloud account, other tools and materials we need for a migration like that. Puppet or Ansible. I might put Splunk. I might need you to buy me a license for something. Same thing with configuration management. What about symbols and meaning? A big one is money, right? Another one is time. It's going to take us less time. And I can put a little smiley face too. We got happy customers. These things lead to happy customers, happy employees, right? So what this does, the social practice map, has effectively decentered your problem out of the context you're in. And then we go back and recenter on a Wardley map. So now you can take all these pieces and go stack them in the right place you're going to source them from. And instead of 100 days of mapping, you can do, I mean, the shortest workshop of this I ever do is about 2 hours. But that's like with a team and an org, with a really specific intent that they're actually going to, it's less hypothetical than this, right? So, yeah, we got cloud compute. It's going to be utility, Splunk, Ansible. We're going to be in product. What are we custom building? Need code to deploy, right? And at the top over here, we should have a customer need that this source code, put open source on here too. It's another good one. You're going to need some components. They're going to run into your monitoring. They're going to run into your compute. Now you've got room for some strategic conversation about where are we going to source these things? Are we going to build it in-house? Are we going to buy a product off the shelf? Or are we going to find a provider that can give us this thing as a service? So I think I'm about out of time. Yep. I'm sure I'll give this talk again. I got magazines up here. If anybody wants a magazine, you're welcome to it. I cover a lot of this in the article. And I am happy to answer any questions and hang out and scribble maps if you're interested. Thank you all for sitting through this. I hope it was helpful even without the slides. Appreciate it.